Hi, everyone. My name is Emily, and I'm 34 years old. What I'm going to share with you today is the story of how my in-laws systematically tore down my confidence, convinced everyone around them I was completely incompetent at managing my own life, and how the most unlikely person became the key to my vindication and ultimately my freedom from their judgment. What happened next was even worse than the constant criticism, but I promise you, there was light at the end of it all. Stay tuned, and I'll tell you everything. Before I dive in, I'd love for you to let me know where you're listening from the comments below. And if you've ever felt unfairly judged or underestimated by people who are supposed to love you, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel, and it helps me know I'm not alone. And if you want to hear more stories like this, please subscribe. My story with my in-laws began like many do, filled with hope and the genuine desire to be welcomed into a new family. I met Mark when I was 26. He was kind, steady, and he loved me fiercely. We dated for a little over a year before we got engaged, and during that time I met his parents, Carol and Robert. Initially, things seemed fine. They were polite, if a little reserved. Carol was impeccably dressed and ran a seemingly perfect household. Robert was quieter, often deferring to Carol. They lived in a beautiful, large house in a very nice neighborhood, the kind of place that felt both aspirational and perhaps a little intimidating. I wanted them to like me. I wanted to fit in. Looking back now, I can see the tiny cracks that were there from the start, the subtle signs I dismissed as nervousness or just different family dynamics. My own family was warm, chaotic, and much more laid back. Meals were loud. Opinions were freely shared but rarely held onto as grudges. Mark's family was measured. Every word seemed carefully chosen, every action deliberate. Carol's home was always spotless, almost sterile. I remember spilling a tiny bit of water on her polished wood floor once, and the way her eye twitched, just slightly, before she produced a cloth from seemingly nowhere to wipe it up. It wasn't a big deal, objectively, but it made me feel clumsy and inadequate. After Mark and I got engaged, the interactions became more frequent, and the scrutiny intensified. Carol started asking questions about my job. I was an office manager, a role that required significant organizational skills, multitasking, and problem-solving, but it wasn't a high-profile, glamorous career. Her questions felt less like genuine interest and more like an assessment. "And that keeps you busy, does it, Emily?" she'd ask, with a tone that suggested she doubted it. Or, "Do you have help with all that?" gesturing vaguely, implying the administrative load must be beyond my capabilities. Then came the wedding planning. Oh, the wedding planning. Carol had very specific ideas about everything, from the invitations to the flowers to the seating chart. I had always dreamed of a slightly more casual, rustic wedding, something that felt warm and personal. Carol envisioned a formal, traditional affair. This was the first major clash, and it was here that I first felt the sting of being actively undermined. If I suggested something, Carol would nod slowly, then gently but firmly explain why her way was superior, couching it in terms of what was proper or what people expect. "Darling," she'd say, placing a perfectly manicured hand on my arm, "the kind of wildflowers you're suggesting are sweet, for a garden party perhaps, but for a formal wedding at the country club? One simply must have roses and lilies. It shows class," or, discussing the budget I'd meticulously planned, she'd sigh. "Emily, dear, I appreciate your thrifty nature, but some things are worth investing in. A bride's flowers, the quality of the catering, these are things guests notice. You don't want people thinking you cut corners, do you?" It wasn't just advice, it was a dismantling of my choices, a quiet implication that my taste was poor, my budgeting skills naive, my understanding of social norms lacking. Mark was caught in the middle. He saw that I was getting stressed and hurt, and he tried to intervene. "Mom, Emily wants wildflowers," he'd say, his voice gentle. Carol would smile indulgently. "Mark, darling, you worry about the rings and the suits. Leave the aesthetics to the ladies." It was a subtle dismissal of both my wishes and Mark's ability to have an opinion on something other than finance. He wasn't used to standing up to his mother. Her influence was pervasive and long-standing. He loved me, and he tried to support me privately, reassuring me my ideas were lovely, but in her presence, he often seemed to shrink, unwilling or unable to challenge her directly. The wedding happened, a beautiful but somewhat stiff affair that felt more like Carol's vision than mine. The comments didn't stop there. Once we were married, the focus shifted to our home, our finances, and eventually, our future plans, particularly about children. We bought a modest house, which we loved. It was older, a fixer-upper, but it had character and a big yard. Carol visited, and her disapproval was palpable. "Oh, Emily, it's quaint," she'd say, her eyes scanning the slightly peeling paint and the older fixtures. "Are you sure you're up to managing all the work this will require? It seems like a lot for someone who isn't perhaps used to maintenance." Again, the subtle jab. Someone who isn't used to maintenance. What did that even mean? My parents weren't handy, but I was perfectly capable of learning. I was excited about DIY projects. But her words planted seeds of doubt. Was I naive? Was this house too much for me? Robert, true to form, would simply follow Carol's lead. If she raised an eyebrow at our older car, he'd make a comment about reliability. If she questioned my ability to manage our budget, he'd nod gravely. It was a tag team of undermining, Carol the lead vocalist, Robert the quiet, nodding backup. They seemed to genuinely believe I was fundamentally incapable. Not just inexperienced, but inherently lacking the necessary skills or intelligence to run a household, manage finances, or make good decisions. It wasn't just about the house, it was everything. My cooking was interesting. My attempts at gardening were met with comments about whether I was sure I'd planted things correctly. My work was described as sweet or a nice way to pass the time, rather than a career I was building. The more they chipped away, the more I started to believe them. I found myself apologizing for things I shouldn't have, second-guessing every decision. I'd spend hours cleaning before they visited, trying to meet Carol's invisible standards, only for her to find some tiny speck of dust or comment on the way I'd arrange something. "Oh, dear, the books aren't quite aligned, are they?" It was soul-destroying. My self-esteem, which had been healthy before, began to crumble. I started to feel anxious every time I knew I would see them. My home, which should have been my sanctuary, became another stage for their judgment. Mark saw my distress, and he tried harder to shield me. He'd make excuses for me, tell his parents I was busy, try to deflect their critical comments. But he wasn't used to direct confrontation either. He'd handle it with humor or gentle redirection, which Carol, a master manipulator, would simply bypass. She knew exactly how to hit me where it hurt, usually with a sweet smile and a concerned tone. "Emily, darling, are you managing your finances all right? Mark mentioned you were looking at a new roof. Are you sure you've budgeted for unexpected repairs? These old houses can be such money pits, especially if you're not accustomed to handling large sums." It was always laced with that implication. "You, Emily, are not capable." Then came the news that Mark and I were expecting our first child. We were overjoyed. We thought this might change things, soften them. Surely, the arrival of a grandchild would bring warmth and acceptance? We were so wrong. The focus of their criticism simply shifted. Now, I was an incompetent mother-to-be. Carol immediately had opinions on everything. My diet during pregnancy was concerning, my choice of stroller was impractical, the nursery colors were too stimulating. She questioned my research on childcare, implying I wasn't reading the right books or talking to the right people, meaning, of course, her. "Have you thought about how you'll manage once the baby is here, Emily? It's a tremendous amount of work. You know, some people simply aren't cut out for the demands of round-the-clock care. It requires a certain temperament and a lot of organization." Again, the implication was clear. You, Emily, lack that temperament and organization. She started talking about hiring help before the baby was even born, not for her convenience, but for mine, because she was convinced I wouldn't be able to cope. It felt like a self-fulfilling prophecy they were trying to engineer. Convince me I'm incompetent, offer solutions based on my supposed incompetence, thus reinforcing the idea that I need help because I am incompetent. It was a vicious cycle. We decided we would need some help, but on our terms. Mark and I agreed a few hours a week of childcare once I went back to work part-time would be helpful. Meanwhile, Carol took it upon herself to find a full-time nanny for herself. Her reasons were vague, needing help with household tasks, though her house was always perfect, and claiming she needed assistance with her busy schedule. It felt like another subtle dig, as if to say, "See? I manage my life so well, I need a professional to assist, whereas you will barely cope with one child." This is where Clara came into the picture. Clara was in her late 40s, with a warm smile and kind eyes. She had years of experience working with families and seemed incredibly capable and calm. Carol hired her, and Clara started working for my in-laws a few weeks before my daughter, Lily, was born. During my visits to their house, I'd sometimes see Clara. She was always busy, but she'd offer me a quiet smile or a helpful gesture. I got the impression she was exceptionally good at her job. What I didn't realize was that Clara was also getting an earful about me. Carol, it turned out, couldn't resist complaining about me, even to her paid staff. She would talk about my supposed incompetence, my poor decisions, my inability to cope, right in front of Clara. She'd sigh dramatically and say things like, "Oh, Clara, I just worry about poor Emily. She's so sweet, but she's simply not practical. I don't know how she'll manage with the baby. Mark tries his best, but he works such long hours. I'm afraid she'll be completely overwhelmed. We'll probably have to step in and help a lot, which is a burden, but what can you do?" She wasn't just saying this once in a while. According to Clara later, it was a regular topic of conversation. My supposed failings were discussed over coffee, during car rides, while Clara was helping organize closets. Carol painted a picture of me as a well-meaning but utterly hopeless scatterbrain who was barely keeping her head above water and who was about to drown completely once motherhood hit. Robert would chime in with his usual quiet agreement, reinforcing Carol's narrative. Meanwhile, at home, I was struggling. Not because I was incompetent, but because being a new mother is hard. It's exhausting, overwhelming, and a massive learning curve. On top of that, I had the constant weight of my in-laws' implied judgment bearing down on me. Every time I felt tired or unsure, the voice in my head, which sounded suspiciously like Carol's, would whisper, "See? I told you you couldn't handle it." My self-doubt was at an all-time high. I was doing my best, learning on the fly, fueled by love for my daughter, but I felt like a failure because my reality wasn't the serene, perfect picture Carol expected, and which I was convinced I was failing to achieve due to my own flaws. I was afraid to ask for help from my in-laws because I knew it would just confirm their low opinion of me. So I soldiered on, isolated and feeling increasingly inadequate. Mark was my rock during this time, but even his support had limits. He loved me and Lily, but he still struggled to fully grasp the depth of the emotional toll his parents were taking on me. He saw their comments as annoying but harmless. Just how his mom is, he didn't understand that their persistent negativity was eroding my sense of self-worth brick by painstaking brick. Then, about 3 months after Lily was born, something completely unexpected happened. Clara called me. I was surprised. We had only exchanged pleasantries at family gatherings. She asked if I was free to meet for coffee. I was curious and, frankly, grateful for any excuse to get out of the house for an hour. We met at a quiet cafe. Clara seemed nervous at first. She fidgeted with her hands and avoided eye contact. I asked her how things were going working for Mark's parents. She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "Emily," she said, looking at me directly, her voice low and serious. "I need to tell you something. Something important." My stomach tightened. Had something happened? Was it about Lily? I recently gave my notice to Carol and Robert, Clara continued. I won't be working for them anymore. I was surprised. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Clara. Is everything okay?" She shook her head slowly. "Not entirely. I've enjoyed the work itself, but there are some things I'm not comfortable with. Specifically, the way they talk about you." My heart started to pound. "The way they talk about me?" Clara nodded. "Yes. Almost constantly. about how you're struggling with the baby, how you're not organized, how you're not coping. They've said you're incompetent, Emily. That you're not fit to manage a household, let alone raise a child without significant help. They've said these things to me, repeatedly. It's one of the main reasons I decided to leave. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. To hear it laid out so plainly, from an outside observer, confirmed everything I had suspected but hadn't wanted to fully admit. It wasn't just my imagination. They were actively, deliberately, and consistently portraying me as incompetent to others, even their own employee. Why would they do that? I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. Clara looked genuinely sympathetic. I don't know their motivations, Emily, but I've been working for families for 20 years. I see a lot. And I have to tell you, from what I've observed when I've been around you with Lily, and what I know about running a home, everything they say about you is completely untrue. My head shot up. What? You are a wonderful mother, Emily, she said firmly. I've seen how gentle and patient you are with Lily. I've seen how you manage when you visit their house, always prepared, always calm despite the atmosphere. You are clearly capable. You are organized. You are handling motherhood beautifully, especially for a first-time mom. What they are saying is not based on reality. Her words were like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. All this time, I had been internalizing their criticism, letting it define me. Here was an objective, experienced professional, someone who had nothing to gain, telling me it was all a lie. But why would you tell me this, Clara? I asked, still trying to process. Clara leaned forward. Because it's not right, Emily. It's not fair to you. I've seen how their words affect you. And, well, I'm also looking for new work. And, honestly, after hearing how they talk about you, seeing how they treat you, I would much rather work for you than for them. I need to work for good people. And you are good people, Emily. She paused, then added, I know you and Mark were considering getting some childcare help eventually. I wanted to let you know I was available and that I genuinely believe in your ability to be a great employer and a great mother. Unlike what they seem to think. I was stunned. Validation and a solution, all wrapped into one incredible conversation. Clara didn't just quit her job. She quit her job because of how they treated me and then offered to work for me. It was the most powerful repudiation of my in-laws' narrative I could ever have imagined. I went home and told Mark everything. I was crying, but not just from sadness. There was a surge of anger, yes, but also immense relief and a burgeoning sense of clarity. Mark was shocked by the extent of it, hearing how Clara had witnessed their constant negativity. He finally seemed to understand that this wasn't just minor family friction, it was a sustained campaign to paint me as incompetent. We talked to Clara more, and we decided to hire her part-time initially with the possibility of increasing hours later. Knowing she would be coming to our home, seeing me in my element, parenting my daughter, and that she believed in me, was incredibly empowering. Hiring Clara was a quiet act of defiance, but it felt like a seismic shift in our lives. It meant I had support, yes, but more importantly, it meant I had an ally, someone who had seen the truth and validated my experience. The next major step was the confrontation. Mark agreed that we needed to address this directly with his parents. We couldn't let them continue to spread this narrative, not just for my sake, but for the health of our family and for Lily's future. We didn't want her growing up around that kind of negativity and judgment, or hearing her mother constantly put down. We arranged to have dinner at their house. The atmosphere was tense from the moment we arrived. They could probably sense something was off. After the initial pleasantries, Mark cleared his throat. Mom, Dad, he started, his voice a little shaky but firm. We need to talk about something serious. Carol's smile tightened. Oh, what is it, Mark? Is everything all right? I took a deep breath. This was my moment. It's about the things you've been saying about me, I said, my voice trembling slightly, but strengthening as I went on. We know you've been telling people, including Clara, that I'm incompetent, that I can't manage the house or cope with Lily. Silence. Carol's eyes widened slightly in feigned surprise, but there was a flicker of something else there too. Guilt? Anger? Defensiveness? Robert just stared at his plate. Emily, darling, wherever did you get such an idea? Carol asked, her voice dripping with false sweetness. We would never say such things. Clara told me. Carol, I said, looking her straight in the eye. She quit because she was uncomfortable with how often and how negatively you spoke about me. She heard you calling me incompetent, saying I wouldn't be able to handle things. Carol's face hardened. Clara? Oh, I see. That woman was clearly fabricating stories. I had a feeling about her, you know. She wasn't quite professional. Probably trying to stir up trouble.
It's a shame, really.
We thought she was adequate, but clearly not. It was textbook deflection and gaslighting. Blame the whistleblower. Deny everything. I expected it, but it still stung. She wasn't fabricating anything, Mom, Mark said, stepping in.
His voice was stronger now.
She heard you. We've heard your comments too, Mom. For years. About Emily's job, her budgeting, the house, now Lily. It's constant criticism, and it's based on you thinking she's not good enough. And frankly, it's not true, and it's not fair. Robert finally spoke, his voice gruff. Now, hold on. Your mother just expresses concern. She worries. It's what parents do. There's a difference between concern and constant undermining, Dad, Mark retorted. You've both made Emily feel inadequate for years. And it stops now. Made her feel inadequate? Carol scoffed, leaning back in her chair. We simply point out reality, Mark. Some people are naturally more capable than others. It's not an insult. It's just an observation. Emily is sweet, but she needs help. We were simply stating the obvious. That word, incompetent. They might not have used it to our faces every time, but that was the clear, unmistakable message behind every observation, every backhanded compliment, every concern, and now, hearing Carol essentially admit it, justifying it as merely stating the obvious, was infuriating. Stating the obvious? I repeated, my voice rising. The obvious is that you have a problem with me, Carol. That you've never accepted me or believed in me. You've spent years trying to convince everyone, including me, that I'm not good enough. That is simply not true, Emily, she said, her voice sharp now, the sweet facade gone. We have welcomed you into this family. We have tried to guide you, to help you. But you are resistant to help. You are resistant to admitting you need guidance. Guidance? Or control? I shot back. The dam had broken. All the years of suppressed hurt, frustration, and self-doubt came rushing out. You didn't want to guide me. You wanted me to be a carbon copy of your perfect image. And when I wasn't, you decided I must be broken. You didn't even give me a chance. This is ridiculous, Robert said, standing up. You are clearly overreacting, Emily. Your mother means well. Meaning well doesn't give you the right to tear someone down repeatedly. Mark exclaimed, also standing. We're not accepting this anymore. You will stop talking about Emily this way. You will stop implying she is incompetent. If you cannot do that, then we cannot have you in our lives or Lily's life on a regular basis. This was the boundary. Stark, clear, and delivered with conviction by my husband, my partner, who was finally fully seeing and standing up to his parents. The look on Carol's face was a mixture of shock and fury. She was not used to being challenged, especially not by Mark. Is that a threat, Mark? She asked, her voice dangerously low. It's not a threat, Mom, he replied, his voice steady. It's a boundary. We love you, but we will not allow you to harm our family with your negativity and judgment. The argument continued for a while longer, spiraling into accusations and denials. They accused me of being overly sensitive, of misunderstanding them, of driving a wedge between them and their son. They maintained they had only ever been concerned. We maintained they had been cruel and undermining. There was no resolution that night, no tearful apologies or sudden understanding. We eventually left, the air thick with unresolved anger and hurt. The fallout was immediate and painful. Carol and Robert didn't back down. They interpreted our boundary as an attack, a rejection. They began telling other family members that we had unfairly accused them, that I was overly emotional and had manipulated Mark, and that we were selfishly keeping Lily from them because we couldn't handle parenting ourselves. The narrative of my supposed incompetence, and now my supposed vindictiveness, spread. Some family members, sadly, believed them or chose to avoid taking sides, which felt like tacit agreement with my in-laws. Others, the few who knew us well, saw through it. It was a painful time of fractured relationships and awkward encounters. But amidst the chaos, there was strength. Mark and I were more united than ever. He had seen his parents' true colors when pushed, their unwillingness to apologize or even acknowledge the validity of our feelings. He was firmly on my side, and that was everything. And I had Clara. Having her come to our house a few days a week was transformative. She saw me with Lily, saw me managing the household, juggling tasks, learning and growing. She didn't just see it, she affirmed it. "You're doing wonderfully, Emily," she'd say. Or, "That's a great way to soothe her." Her quiet praise and confidence in me were a balm to my wounded spirit. She became more than an employee. She became a trusted friend and confidant. Working for me versus working for Carol provided Clara with a stark comparison, and she often shared insights into how different the two environments were. Carol had treated Clara like hired help, a tool to perform tasks, and a sounding board for her complaints. I treated Clara with respect, as a professional whose expertise I valued and whose presence was a gift. "It's like night and day, Emily," Clara told me one afternoon. "Working here feels peaceful. It feels like I'm genuinely helping a kind family. Over there, it always felt like I was walking on eggshells and that my main job was listening to complaints about you." Knowing she had that perspective, that she had seen both sides and chosen mine, was incredibly validating. It wasn't just my husband who believed me. It was someone who had witnessed the situation from the periphery, someone unbiased who confirmed that my in-laws' perception of me was a distortion. Over the next few months, our relationship with Carol and Robert became very limited. We didn't cut them off completely, but contact was infrequent and supervised. Visits were short, held on neutral ground like a park, and focused solely on Lily. The moment a critical comment about me or my parenting arose, we would immediately end the visit. It was difficult and painful, and they reacted with further indignation and claims of being unfairly treated. But we held firm. Setting that boundary and enforcing it consistently was one of the hardest things I've ever done. It felt unnatural to limit contact with my husband's parents, to create distance. But it was necessary for my mental health and for the well-being of my own family. Gradually, the constant anxiety and self-doubt began to recede. With Clara's support at home, Mark's unwavering support, and the physical and emotional distance from my in-laws' negativity, I started to heal. I stopped second-guessing every decision. I learned to trust my instincts as a mother and a wife. I made mistakes, of course, because everyone does, but I learned from them instead of letting them confirm a narrative of failure. I poured my energy into my home, not to make it perfect for someone else's judgment, but to make it a warm, comfortable, and happy place for my family. I enjoyed learning about parenting, not from a place of fear that I would fail, but from a place of curiosity and love. My career started to take off as well. Freed from the emotional weight dragging me down, I had more energy and confidence. I took on new responsibilities at work and thrived. It was concrete proof, for myself more than anyone else, that I was far from incompetent. The relationship with my in-laws remains strained. There hasn't been a magical reconciliation or a heartfelt apology. We exist in a state of cautious, limited contact. They haven't stopped their critical nature entirely, but now, their words lack the power they once held. I no longer internalize them. I see them for what they are, a reflection of their own issues, their own need for control, their own inability to accept me as I am. Clara continues to work with us, and her presence is a daily reminder of the turning point in my story. She saw me when I was at my lowest, struggling under the weight of external judgment, and she offered a different perspective, a lifeline of validation. Her simple act of telling the truth and choosing to work for me wasn't just about a job, it was an act of profound kindness and belief. This experience taught me that sometimes the people closest to you, the ones who are supposed to lift you up, can be the ones who try to hold you down the most. It taught me the devastating impact of relentless criticism and the slow erosion of self-worth it can cause. But it also taught me the incredible power of validation, whether it comes from a trusted friend, a supportive partner, or even an unexpected source like Clara. It taught me that setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's essential for self-preservation. It's okay to protect your peace, even if it means creating distance from family. It taught me that my competence wasn't defined by my in-laws' opinions, but by my actions, my resilience, and my ability to learn and grow. I am not incompetent. I am strong, capable, and worthy, just as I am. And no one, not even family, has the right to make you feel otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. It was incredibly difficult to live through, but sharing it feels like another step in my healing journey. If anything I've said resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you weren't good enough in the eyes of the people who matter most, please share your experience in the comments below. Let's support each other. If this story touched you, please hit that like button. And if you want to hear more stories about navigating difficult family relationships and finding your strength, please subscribe to my channel. Your support means the world to me. Remember to speak your truth and protect your peace.